Yinka, it's been a delight working under you and watching all the great things you've done, and the magic. And I just want you to just start out with us and tell us how your background in property. How did you come into property, and how has this shaped all the things that you've been able to achieve in terms of your education, your experience? Has this contributed to the large-scale development that you've done? Why haven't you just gone about doing smaller projects? Why have you chosen to build towns? That's something you like. You like master plans. You like cities. Yes.
Okay, I think education is one thing, but I think really the main thing is about working out in the field, and it's about cutting your teeth on different projects. And I think I've just been blessed to be given the opportunity to work on some great projects. I've had very visionary bosses that have shown me not to be afraid of large-scale projects. Of course, like everybody, we started with very small scale. We did, 2 houses here and there. We did little office buildings, bank branches. But we very quickly decided that in order to meet the huge deficit we have in this country, we need to start thinking large scale. And also to try to attract institutional funding and to do investment grade projects, we really needed to go large scale. And of course, a project is a confluence of all sorts of, you have consultants, contractors, financiers, teams that help you do these things. So I feel a bit, it's about everybody really that sorts out these projects. I think to have been given the opportunity to do Orange Island is almost like a compilation of everything that I've managed to learn, to be able to reclaim an lagoon, watch it come to the water, watch it consolidate, if you can watch consolidation, deploy the infrastructure, the roads, the electricity, the water, and everything that makes great neighborhoods work. And to try to sell in this market, I think has been testing, but has just been a confluence of everything that I've learned.
Mr. Idowu, I'm just going to ask you straight, how did you get into property development?
Those that know me, my family background, we generally, at the time, my dad had been in business for 48 years, and we had a lot of property all over Lagos, especially warehouses, commercial, residential, but not so much residential. So my own side was in England. We used to do simple renovations, and I won't call it property business, it's almost commodity type business on the side. Came to Nigeria, tried to dabble a bit in little facility management, property management, trading. My business was electronics and telecom, but background, I had to watch over what was going on with many properties. And it became very obvious that exactly what Yinka said. If you were going to do anything, you really had to go out there and make everything yourself. You go to a property and you're having to provide all infrastructure for one property. It didn't make sense. The same infrastructure you could provide for an estate, because in Nigeria it's one man, one generator, one man, one borehole, one man, one security guard, and it didn't make sense. So you had to scale, and you obviously had to, I want to make one quick point before I stop here, because you asked that question, how do I get into property? My route is the same route as everybody. The only difference is that they will be dreaming, and they perhaps are not in a position to execute what they want to do. Because you have very brilliant designers, very brilliant planners, but unfortunately they're not decision makers. So, and then you also have a situation where even if you're a decision maker, you're not a finance there. So the minute you have someone who has the access to finance and is a decision maker and he can dream, then you can make it happen. Many people have nice drawings and nice ideas and everything, but they don't have the money, they don't have access to decision makers, and they can't make it work. So roots to the project. I was lucky to be in a positions that perhaps at that time people would not have supported, and I had finance to make it work. So that is my access to the business. Otherwise, I'll just be sitting down with very nice drawing, and I'll be still working somewhere else. So.
Thank you so much, sir. Ron, I'm just going to go straight and ask you, the big fancy rule. So if I had 10,000 naira for each time people asked me, do you think Eco Atlantic is going to be a successful project? I would probably be a billionaire. All right. A lot of times when we're trying to pitch for research mandate, it's almost like the question they ask to test us to see if we really understand anything about this real estate market. Say, what do you think about Eco Atlantic? And the short answer I always give them is, what did you think about Banana Island? And for the longest period, people looked at Banana Island the way some people look at Eco Atlantic today. But we all then know that Banana Island is pretty much the most desirable estate to live in today, that's available to live in today. So I'm just going to ask you, what are your thoughts? How do we marry Banana Island, Eco Atlantic? Where exactly are we going?
Let's start with Banana Island as its history, and we've seen it. When we were first building Banana Island, we were selling at an absolute fraction of the cost of what it was maybe a decade later or even 7 years later. And at that time, no one wanted to touch Banana Island. A lot of people, we were telling friends, we were telling clients, come buy now. It's the time to buy. It's $100 and something per square meter. This is the time to come and buy. And everyone was looking at it. No, it's on the lagoon. It's a bit far off. It's not. And overnight, it just became, once it started picking up, it became a very big success. And we know that the prices multiplied significantly soon after. Eco Atlantic is a different beast in the sense that it's a much more long-term project. And it's a game of patience, because at the end of the day, Lagos is Nigeria. Nigeria is growing the way it is. Yes, we're coming out of a recession and now entering a different kind of recession, which is probably going to be global. But the fundamentals will remain. We're going to keep on growing in terms of size, in terms of demographic, in terms of income, in terms of industrialization. And at the end of the day, Lagos going from 20 million people to 30 million people in the next 10 years, it's absolutely insane trying to imagine that. And we're going to need space. We're going to need major developments. As Yinka said, we need to start thinking in scale. And Eco Atlantic is going to play a piece in that. Now, in terms of, is it a success? We think that today it is a success because our initial goal was to protect against coastal erosion in Victoria Island. And Victoria Island was in a very bad shape in 2005. And today we're covering quite a significant area, and we still have a small stretch left. And then we would have covered the area that we were mandated to protect. And then there's still work that needs to be done down the coast, as that's the nature of coastal erosion. But as a second phase, the level of infrastructure there is very, very high, much better than Banana Island. And we are seeing a lot of clients who are looking at, starting the construction. We have a lot of designs now in review. So we're seeing now the next phase of the project kicking in. It takes time. As we know, design takes time, engineering takes time, and financing takes time. So putting all these together and then coming up with a product on its own, before even seeing the first filing rig, is about 2 years, sometimes 3 years. Could be, sometimes faster, but we do see that sort of timing.
I'm going to ask you essentially like the theme question for this discussion, and I'm probably going to ask Mr. Idowu as well. In your own opinion and based on your experience, what does it take to do large-scale developments?
As Yemi said, you have to be able to dream. You have to understand your market, understand your product, understand the challenges that you're about to face. I think, we have the same problems as developers all around the world, but then we have this intangible, this Nigeria factor and the way we do things here. And I know we're always talking about our environments. Some of the things are good, some of the things are bad, but I think the most important thing is to understand the way things are done in Nigeria and to be able to innovate and think about how to finance how to sell, how to deal with regulators, how to deal with the government. So I think I've jumped around a little bit, but if I was going to go through a roadmap of what you needed to do, I would say understand the market, do the research and understand your addressable market and who's going to buy your product. Ensure that the product is what the market wants. Understand how you're going to do the product in the most efficient, most economical way. Understand and don't be too ambitious on your profits. Know your regulators and know the government. Amass the best team you can afford in terms of consultants, contractors, the people that will work with you, and then just go out and do it.
All right, thank you so much. So Yemi, I'm going to ask you the same question, but I'm going to ask you in a different way. All right. So again, every now and then I meet a young developer that, just sells, again, like you said, he has a vision, she has a dream. And, they typically always, just kind of like to demonstrate how good and how well they want to do. They're going to say, they often say, so I'm going to do it like Yemi Idowu, You hear that phrase a lot, like Yemi Idowu. It's a phrase, by the way, sir, just in case you didn't know. So what does it take to do large-scale development like Yemi Idowu?
So I think Yinka has answered it very well. But what I will do is I'll perhaps the lecturer side of me, maybe perhaps explain it. I'll come from a different angle. And that is that if you're going to do any business, whether it's selling to selling, it is an enterprise. And as a result of an enterprise, you have to engage enterprise risk. And then you break the enterprise risk into three primary types of risk: market risk, operational risk, and financial risk. And then I try to give you a picture of like an onion, and you have layers of risk that you must peel over, and you must understand that there's a global or systemic risk that you must engage, which in this case will be the Nigerian factor. And then as you come lower, you start having to engage the internal risks that are specific to the project itself. Your ability to identify the risk on every endeavor of your enterprise will determine your rate of success. So you must also apportion risk proportionally, and assign factors of risk to each one. And obviously your total risk is the enterprise risk versus the amount of money you put determines the kind of profit you get. So when she said, the nugget in what she said was be realistic with your profits. And I see people, very beautiful drawings, and they put too much emphasis on the drawings, and they put too much emphasis on, oh, we've got this, we've got this. They don't look at how those other risks are very important. And such that when you now start skewing your formula, sometimes long-term is better. Sometimes short-term is better. It depends on where you're coming from. If I have a small amount of money, I can go ahead and quickly do something fast, roll it over and go to the next thing. Or I take that small amount of money, I leverage it, and then I lose all the money, I'm out of business. So maybe I shouldn't be saying this, but I'll give you, I'm one of the first people that invested for Atlantic City. And actually I do get those questions when people ask this. And even on Orange Island, people also ask me questions. And they don't understand that when the history of Nigeria is being written, the people on this panel for Orange Island and Eko Atlantic City are going to be part of Nigerian history. For Eko Atlantic City, when you're doing history in future, this is going to be a lecture. Orange Island is going to be a lecture. People are going to sit down in engineering class going to look at case studies, and you're going to have Orange Island as a case study, Eco Atlantic as a case study. We need to understand that this is a process. If you're trying to market a property to somebody, you don't say, look, you buy and sell and you make profit. No, it's the other way around. It's more of a defensive thing. It's a store of wealth. It's a store of value for you. You key in and you slowly, number one, against inflation, and you slowly build your wealth on that business. So even if they don't deliver the property to you, now cook the food, your money is in the property. There's, you go there every day. I drive every time. By the way, thank you for the stickers. I've got stickers now, so I can go into the city. And you see every day there's something going on. And from the commoditization of property in Nigeria is the unfortunate reason why we're not able to do large-scale projects. So to go back to your question properly and to answer that, people have to understand that you don't treat it like a. And this, I'll make this very important point. When someone says, I bought a property for 12 million naira and I've sold it for 40 million naira, that is fool's gold. Yeah. Because 40 million naira, you walk up and down everywhere, you can only buy the same thing you just sold for 40 million naira, probably even you pay more. So when you go to Atlantic City, invest your money in there as a store of wealth, go to sleep. Go to Orange Island, invest your money, go to sleep. Stop disturbing them. The only time you panic is if you get there and you see the security man there, with toothpick and, nothing is going on there, you have a problem. But when you have professionals behind it, you see the investment is going on, it's a long-term project. If you want somewhere to live, go to Lekki Phase 1, buy a property and move in there and live in there. But for me, when I'm doing large-scale projects, I take this market risk into consideration. I make sure that I deal with people who have short-term goals and objectives I can deliver to them. I look for people who have long-term objectives that I can key into and support me. And technically, they're your strategic partners. So when I did Northern Foreshore, there were many people that wanted to buy 1 plot, 2 plot. I refused. I went to look for an anchor off-taker. And when I got the off-taker, that was it. And so the situation now in Nigeria is that we need to, change the mindset. And this webinar the reason I came on this webinar was it would be an opportunity for me to actually for the first time speak to a much more technical and more knowledgeable audience to try and explain, this business of commoditization of property has to stop, because you have to use the building block method. When you have large developments as building block large developments, overall you have a better city, and then people key in off that. So if I go to America today, I go into New York, I can buy a property and build a standalone property. I'll finish it in 18 months. But I forget that somebody else has built that place over 100 years. So what is happening now is that you're having a Atlantic City coming up, and they're building up, and they're providing infrastructure, they're providing all the support services, which in future, somebody's going to turn up and he'll come and do a development in 12 months and say, oh, I did it in 12 months. But there's somebody's built over 12 years, 15 years, and it's put together an infrastructure that you can benefit of. So that I will stop there, but that is one of the things which I think will answer the question you've presented to me.
Ron, I want to ask you a question. How do you guys do luxury? It's like, again, like the way a lot of people say, like Yemi Idowu, a lot of people, where they want to do luxury, they say like the Chagouries. It's like you guys just know how to make it work. A lot of us see a tower, going up, and we think, who's going to feel this? And before the tower is finished, we already see the people that want to feeling it. So what are the things that, and it's essentially the same question. How are you able to do large-scale luxury projects? What does it take?
So I'll start with an element. It's first thing, it's Nigeria is a very, very interesting market in the sense that we build something and sometimes the outcome of like the market response tends to be like, we saw developments where people are saying, where we decide let's go for smaller sized units because they come at a better price, and we end up with buyers saying, no, can we knock down the walls and make bigger size units? We get a lot of these things when we look at the market studies that say, no, you should go for more. Not that that's not a market, it's just that it's always a surprising market. So what happens is what we do is we spend a lot of time on planning. Extensive amount of time on planning, in the sense that we sometimes lose 6 months because we're not convinced on a corridor space, for example, because it's a waste of space and we want to maximize the amount of space. And that, by having that, maximizing that, when we get into a building in an apartment that may be smaller in square meters, we feel that it's as big as maybe something bigger, which allows to play a bit with the pricing, but then it also allows us to have very efficient in a very efficient way of progressing when we start building the buildings. So there's a lot of time spent on engineering and value engineering and planning up front. And once we finally hit the ground, we tend to come up with very good end product. And we have extensive experience. I mean, Ocean Parade was one of the first major residential real estate projects we've done ourselves in terms of for the private market. And we learned a lot, building by buildings, how to keep on improving the quality of the finishing of the materials. And now when we move to the newer developments we're doing, we reach a certain level of know-how and our teams on the ground. It's really there's also a lot of training we have our own contracting company, and we keep on training. There's a constant training and reinvesting in the knowledge in our companies, which allow to upgrade the quality project after project. So these are really two key elements, spending a lot of time on design and engineering, and then a lot of emphasis on the execution, in our case, through our own contractor.
Yinka, what role does research play in your projects? How much research do you do? And then do you believe it? What role does research play?
You know that I think that research is absolutely essential.
That's what you recruited me for.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely, I can't emphasize this enough. Unfortunately, we don't have access to a lot of the information some of our colleagues or some of our fellow developers have in other jurisdictions. So we have to do a lot of it ourselves. It's getting better. The Office of Statistics has some things. We have Northcourt now to help us with it, but it's even as basic as comparable evidence, comparable sales prices. I find a lot of developers get it wrong. A lot of developers will go to an area and believe they can price higher than what the capital value or land values or house values are in that area, just because they have a pretty plan. They think they can come in and essentially be market maker and say because they have this wonderful plan for this new area, therefore they can price their product higher than everything else in that area. Obviously, that's the wrong approach. I think more and more we're going to have to do more research as the market gets tighter. We're going to see as developers the value of doing essential research.
I've heard so many stories and myths on Yemi's pricing economics. You know, some of them are so, they say you have this model that you use. There's just so much that I've heard about how you price your products. Can you share some thoughts, and just lay to bed some of these rumors, so to say?
Of course. So, but the thing is that one thing we need to come to a conclusion and agreement on is that there are two professions that you find almost anybody feels they know all about it. You'll never go to a plane and say, look, you want to be like a pilot, you should kill yourself. You you can't be a doctor. But to be a football coach in your sitting room and your remote control, you can control United. And to be a property developer, even my grandmother is a property developer. My gate man is a property developer. Everybody thinks they're a property developer. But you need to appreciate that it is a profession. And there are technicalities and tricks to the trade. And the minute you start appreciating that there's skills and there's a rule to getting to where you are, then the guy who seems to be doing it every time, or the people doing it, then it's not, it's because his father is very rich, it's because one thing is behind it, or one belongs to Chagoury or belongs to this one or whatever. But they don't realize that, it's a skill. So when you see people who are doing something and they tell you, look, construction company, we train, they slowly reveal to you, or they say, look, we've done this research, we've done this. The reason why they win or they are successful is because they follow the right rules and they have certain specifications to what they're doing that make them what they are. And you go to McDonald's and you eat a very cheap hamburger, it tastes very well, and you go home and you try and make the hamburger, you just won't get the same thing. There's a reason for it. So for property, especially pricing, you just can't game the market. In the long term, you get found out. If there's the components, the land, the regulatory aspect, the professional aspect of things, the construction costs, and all these things come together. At the end of the day, if it doesn't add up, you're going to lose money. And if you have the wrong expectations or unrealistic expectations, you get into trouble. So now the pricing strategy is very simple. At the end of the day, you need to make sure that your capital component, your equity component must be right. You must not be over leveraged. Because if you're over leveraged, you pay in the long run, and that's what happens to many developers. Your application of funds and the way you execute your construction is also very important. And if you don't get those things right, at the end of the day, you get into trouble. And you must be able to reward the buyer with something. Someone coming to you early to give you his money must be able to see over time. And that must be the pricing strategy that you're having at the end of the day. So what I do is I make my business in such a way that very quickly I try and make sure I sell what I can sell, and I make sure that I concentrate on delivering for the people who I've sold to. And you don't want a situation you're building 10 units, people pay you for 4, and you take the money of 4 people to try and build 10 properties. What you have 10 properties are 40%, 40%. So make sure that you focus on delivering to the 4 people, let them have their property, and you move on to your phase 2. And then you can move on to phase 3, move on to phase 4. Now, sorry, I'm going to take you back. I'll finish up on one point. When you're talking about Eco Atlantic City and Orange Island, sorry, they didn't pay me any money, so I'm not here to market for them. So just tell people, Lekki Phase 1 is still a construction site. Lekki Phase 1 is still under construction. How many years is Lekki Phase 1? So when you're talking about Eco Atlantic or Orange Island, you must understand that these are very large-scale projects that previously been done by government, but now private sector are doing it, and it's private money. If they get it wrong, they're gonna start driving Uber tomorrow. So they know what they're doing.
Driving already.
That'll be a sight.
The price that has been adopted for this project is not someone just making it up. They've sat down and they've looked at it and said, what are recovery rates and what area are we opening up? And if you go internationally, you see the advert that comes out and say, look, we're opening up for sale section 1. And then maybe 6 months later, you just see the advert coming out. We're now opening up for sale section 2. And it has the lake, the private lake, and it overlooks this, and it's the green area, this, and stuff like that. And this is a strategy. Pricing strategy doesn't help. But
yeah, sorry, sir. That's the strategy they talk about that you do.
It's a good one.
People do it, and unfortunately, some people don't do it. You just see people just come out for sale and buy one here, buy there, and stuff like that. But the way you should do it is you get the first set of people in, and there's something you're selling, a concept. I mean, during this unfortunate coronavirus situation, you could now see the benefit of gated private estates. You saw on social media, people worried about crowds of people running on the streets, trying to attack, got the shutdown and everything. But if you went to private gated estates, you go to Banana Island, you go to Northern Foreshore, you go to probably, ARM, Lackway Estate, or any of these other private estates, you saw people, even though they were shut down, they came out of their house with their wife or their children, and they were walking up and down, taking refreshing walks, exercising. They had people delivering fresh fruit to them. They had security. They had water. It's a lifestyle you're selling. So when your strategy is coming, you're not pricing what is cement and water and concrete and everything. You're selling a package. You're selling a vision. You're selling a lifestyle. And there's a unique selling point there that the guy buys into, and it triggers in his mind and says, oh yeah, I want to buy into this. And then people modify the lifestyles to comply with it. And that's where you get, you catch them and you get your money.
Yinka, can you just quickly comment on the timelines for Orange Island?
Okay, initially it was meant to be a 65 month project. So we had said that we would do the reclamation over the first 2 years. We would then consolidate, we thought, for about a year, and then we'll build out the infrastructure another 2 years. And that was for the first phase of the project, what we're calling phase 1A. And really, to have met the 60-month milestone, we should have completed in January, at the end of January 2020. Unfortunately, we had a bit of weather in October, November, that pushed us back. And we were set to complete. We're running a little bit late, where I think we were 3 weeks or 4 weeks behind completion of phase 1A when we were hit by COVID and had to close the site. So we're about 2 weeks away from completion on the roads, the sewer, the water, but not on the electricity, because as I'm sure Eco Atlantic and Ron and Yemi will tell you, on electricity you have to be quite, it's almost driven by occupation. So we will, as people start to build out their homes, we will deploy the electricity. But for now, we're 3 weeks away from completion on phase 1.
Ron, I just want to understand, I just want to get into your mind a little about project conceptualization. So there's this popular CEO that once said, if I asked my customers what they wanted, they wouldn't know. All right. So, I think it was the Sony CEO that said, I would be the one to tell my customers, you know what, I'll give you a Discman and not a Walkman. And I'm the one that was going to give you an MP3 player and not a Discman anymore. He was the one that would visualize what the customer wants. Is this true for real estate, or you need to give the customer what they want?
I'll look back a bit at the history. We have quite a lot of history in real estate and other types of development. Let's use the conference center at the Hotel, for example. When we first started it, there was no market. I mean, there was no market or no case study of that would actually say we need this size of conference center. And we still went ahead because we felt, and it was a very important project to move forward on. it happened to be a very, very big success in the sense, and it created a market in this. And we also know that it also helped the entertainment industry in a way, because now there was a place to have proper concerts, and there was a place to host awards, international awards. So, and it also helped many other industries. But let's use that industry as an example. By being able to do that suddenly it showed. We actually managed to highlight a lot of our entertainment industry in one location. So that created other markets. But using that, it's now we're seeing conference centers pre-crisis being a very big need. That's an example I like to give, because we didn't know. We were basically going at it without even much market study on that. We also, for many, many years, know in Nigeria we won't be living in flats. We only want to live in homes. The number of times I've heard that sentence is quite big. But at the end of the day, it's not exactly. We changed that. I mean, we changed as a market as a whole with all the developers. Once we start providing that product, we start seeing a different response from the market. First of all, better amenities, pricing were better than a whole house, maintenance. A lot of these benefits were coming out, and now we're going to have to become even more innovative moving forward, because we have a very young market, we have a very fast-growing market, and we need to start catering to that new market that also will probably start acting differently than a market 20, 30 years ago. And that market may not even know exactly, this is exactly what we want as a product, but when we provide that product, they will actually respond positively to it. At the end, also, there's a bit of a risk of we have to try it. Yes, we do need to do some research. That's something a place where research can really come into play. But at the end, on a market without so much track record. And I mean, really, the real estate market started getting institutionalized really in the past 10 years. Yeah. The rental model for offices is very different than it was even 10 years ago, for example, or 15 years ago. And we're going to see more of that institutionalization over the coming years, and that's going to get us to the ability and the opportunity to create new products as well.
Fantastic. Nice, brilliant. Yinka, you do a lot of projects with multi-stakeholders, engaging with governments, families, and all. What does it take to do those type of projects? What kind of skills do you require, to be able to handle all these parties?
Yeah, well, I think to execute those first projects, the first thing to understand is you need to understand what everybody's agenda, what everybody's interest is. So as a developer, you want to make money, optimize the land, monetize the land, make the money. The government, I guess, wants to make sure it's part of its plans and also make money through levies, through taxes, through fees. They want to make sure they're collecting that money informally and formally. Your stakeholders, your buyers want to make sure that they're getting the best value for the money they're paying you. The regulators want to make sure you're keeping to the rules, but also want to make money. The common thread is money. So once you understand that everybody's agenda is not the same as yours, and you understand what their agendas are, and you try to make sure you try to align as much as possible everybody's interests, I think that's how to manage multi-stakeholder projects. But I think it's one of the most difficult things to do. People management in anything is one of the most difficult things, whether it's managing your subscribers, whether it's managing your investors, your finances, any sort of people management is quite difficult. But understand what they want and make sure you can address it, is what I would say.
I think, Yemi, you want to say something. I saw you smiling.
I think we should all understand that there's a difference between a regulatory process and a revenue process. So when you see something masquerading as a regulatory process, when it's actually revenue, need to be associated with that.
Yemi, you saw the 2008 recession. You saw the one in 2014, 2015. How have you weathered? How would you advise other developers to weather COVID-19 and the coming recession?
Well, I think the advice for developers is the same advice for all. The first thing is to understand systemic risk. And the minute you have chosen to operate within Nigeria, you are exposed to Nigeria risk, which is a global Nigerian risk. And the first thing we made in 2008 was people who sat down in houses with their remote control and they were watching America. They said, oh, America financial systems were collapsing, and they didn't understand that it was going to come to Nigeria. And the same thing happened now. People are watching the COVID-19 and the crisis, and they're watching it on CNN, and they're watching a show of, EastEnders or whatever it is people watch. They should understand that we're in a global economy. What's happening here in just a few minutes time. And if you don't plan and take steps to mitigate it, you're going to expose yourself to, you're already exposed to systemic risk, but your reaction or the response to that systemic risk will be a function of how well you prepare for it. So how would I advise, and how am I coping with it? You have to always, the rain is coming, it's going to come. So just take it in your stride. See how you can secure your revenues, try to reduce the risk on the revenues, engage your clients on how you can give them payment terms, try and align your cash flow with your so you go to suppliers and you renegotiate with suppliers, they're facing the same risk like you, and you try and match your cash flows and say, okay, you deliver for me, sectorally over this period, and I will pay you over this period of so many days, and don't run away from it, because the rain is gonna, you're gonna get wet. So don't try and deflect the risk. Go in there, manage it. And secondly, communication is very important. You need to communicate very, 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 very effectively. I mean, if you listen to Yinka, how she communicated now about, phase 1A, this is the time, this is this. When you communicate to people, they don't mind. They might get upset, you should have been 5 minutes ago or whatever. But okay, you're still coming. So once that communication is there, and you can explain that due to the COVID virus or the coronavirus situation, things are going to be different. Since it's a systemic situation and they are facing the same situation, they will understand. And as long as you're communicating to everybody, they're fine. And thirdly, which is the elephant in the room, be realistic about your profit and revenue expectations. Just simply change your timelines and your expectations. And the definition of disappointment is the difference between what is expected and what actually comes. So if you want to you just basically, adjust yourself to the realities, and that is the advice I would give to all businessmen and real estate developers.
All right, Ron, I want you to speak to the same thing. How would you weather? But I want you to speak to, because I'm just looking through our attendee list here, and I can see a lot of luxury developers like yourself, and a few people also doing large-scale projects like the rest of the panelists. How would you weather, knowing that you're selling a luxury good? They said in these times, that's when people want to buy, cheaper goods. All right. So how would you weather, knowing that you sell luxury goods?
Actually, we have plans of selling different kind of products. Now, it happens that our first developers chose to go for luxury, which we know there's going to be a long-term market. But we're also inviting other developers to have a lower entry point in the market, and we find that to be a much bigger market and on the long term. We're even studying ourselves, even many solutions on that. Mortgage rates is going to be a major player in what comes next. If we really do get low two-digit mortgage rates, that could really counter the effects of COVID, because going from a very high interest rate mortgage environment to a lower, even if it's not the lowest, can create a huge boom on the market, COVID or not COVID. And because a lot of people will be able to pay over 20, 25 years versus having to pay over 3 to 4 to 5 years. And then that really expands our market significantly. So these are some of the elements. On other elements, it's also creating resilience. We're finding out that when we heavily depend on imports, any shutdown globally can impact us locally. And an example is, thank God we have a lot of cement production in Nigeria. If we didn't have that, our industry would have been shut down 6 years ago. That's an example in the last crisis. But because we could buy our cement locally, that makes a huge difference. And the more we move forward, the more we need to see how can we produce more locally, how can we source more locally, and that will create a lot more resilience and create jobs in the country and create secondary jobs to the real estate and construction market. So it all comes together, and it's betting on these things. And the third major element is environmental friendly. Today, I do believe, and COVID is teaching us a lesson, that the planet does clean up when we leave it, when we let it do its thing for just a few weeks. But we need to start thinking as a town developer, city developer, or estate developers. We need to start thinking environmental friendly, energy efficiency, resource efficiency. And we recently launched, one of our clients certified that their first building was a green certification. And we are now planning on having this across the board because it is important. And we can, in Nigeria, create set an example for the rest of the world. We can become the example. The technology is available. It doesn't cost much more to have a much greener building, and we can keep on improving over time. But if suddenly we become much more energy efficient, then our costs go down, for our tenant costs or our occupier costs go down, and that makes us more resilient. And we can maybe justify a higher price if we have to. We don't, as Yemi said, it's like we don't have to always push for the highest profit. But yes, if we can have reasonable profits for investors. At the same time, if the cost of operation is much lower, then that becomes a much more interesting value proposition. And that's a huge element, I think, in moving forward.
Yinka, the way I'm going to ask you the question is from an operations perspective, because your project is ongoing. All right. I mean, anytime I think about the fact that you have one large project, you've sold a good chunk of it, and you're just in constant delivery mode, it's just mind-boggling. How are you able to manage, knowing that you still need to deliver in a recessionary environment?
Okay. Just to first say, I think we're better suited than most on how to deal with COVID, because we have consistently worked in an extreme emerging market. We've had a terrible operating environment. Yes, it's gotten a bit better, but we've delivered in spite of the many challenges that we've had in our markets. So I think for Nigerian developers, facing challenge is almost second nature. But in my project particularly, we're quite exposed. We've sold 90% of the project, but a lot of it is coming in milestones. And so we expect that the milestones will not come in as expected. We're having, for instance, we were supposed to start phase 1B and phase 2 in June. We're not going to do that because I don't expect that the milestones will come in. We're going to renegotiate some of our loans, renegotiate, as Yemi says, with our suppliers and our contractors. And the most important thing is to communicate what your damage control is to your stakeholders, so that they understand what you're doing and to carry them along. So that's the approach we're going to take.
Yemi, though a lot of people find it hard to believe that you really have challenges, but let's just assume, for the sake of argument, that you do have challenges. What will be the two top challenges that you've had as a developer, and how have you managed it?
Yeah, we do. Of course, I have challenges. My challenges are on a much, much larger scale than most people perhaps might imagine. Because I have, 17 projects I'm doing now. And you imagine what the cash flow required to be. The biggest risk we face and challenge now is the liquidity.
We've never been, as humans, in human history, we've never been in such a situation where the whole world goes on complete lockdown, and the kind of world we're getting into is absolutely unknown. There's going to be some very positive effects and some negative effects, of course. And so in terms of supply chain, that's going to be a big question. Are we going to be able to secure supply chain soon enough, or is that going to delay us? That's going to be an example of a potential problem. Is a global market slowdown going to reduce remittance into Nigeria, which then has its own, quite a bit of impact on the country? That's another question. Oil industry, while everyone has shut down, the oil industry kept on pumping more, and then we're seeing today the current situation where there's no more storage, and that's going to be a very interesting scenario to look at over the coming months. But when we're used to tightening our belts in hard times, and we've had a few crises. We had the 2008 crisis, and we had the 2014-15 recession. So now we're kind of getting used to riding tough situations and tightening our belts. So it's really that's the main challenge, is being able to be on time plus or minus, or being able to manage our cash flow and be conservative and be when we need to be conservative.
Now, I can imagine this is a difficult question, but capital, raising capital, maintaining, the required capital in a recessionary environment. Yinka, how do you see Orange Island doing this? How would you say young developers can do this? I admit it's a difficult question.
Well, at Orange, our financing was slightly unorthodox. The financial people, I think, just shudder when they look at the way we financed our project, because we depended mainly on pre-sales, and everybody will tell you that's a risky strategy and you shouldn't do that. But it has worked for us. But I think the next few months will show us whether really this was the way to go. I really don't think this is the time to be going to the bank for any sort of funding. I think you should be about retaining whatever capital that you have, and just watching the market. I think we should really just take a watch and see attitude. It's definitely not to deploy capital now. Honestly, I'm a firm believer in some leveraging, but not to over leverage yourself. I think a lot of us take too much funds from the bank. I think there's still equity investors in smaller scale housing, smaller scale high-end residential projects. You can still find some equity investors that will do that. That's for smaller investors, not for large-scale investors. That's what I would say, I think.
All right, Yemi, what are your thoughts?
It's not the time to be going to for money, and now is not the time to be, expanding or looking for more capital. The general approach I've always understood the difference between the equity, it from an accounting point of view, and the quasi-capital that would come in through multiple channels to the business. So the advice I would give to young developers is for them to understand how to have a very amount of discipline to understand what is their money and what is not their money. So when you want to go into a business, if you don't own the land, you don't own the money for construction, you don't own the money for finishing, you don't own anything. You must find a way to have real capital going into the business, which may not necessarily be liquid capital, and you're trying to find some kind of leverage based on the actual capital that you've got. So if you don't obey that rule, then you're dead in the water. And usually when you see people in trouble, that is the reason that they've gone in there with too little capital on too large a project. So I would recommend, if you have your own company that belongs to you and your brother, or you, me, myself, and I, type of thing, own your business, create an SPV for the project, take an equity on the SPV based on what you're contributing or your leverage or on your profit or what you're going to make in future, and bring in quasi-capital for that project, and focus on delivering to the people who are going to provide the quasi-capital for you. When I say quasi-capital, I mean people who are prepaying or who are contributing, not necessarily to participate in the business, but they're looking for something. And the get out of jail card that you must have from day one is not to tie it to dividends, but tie it to actual, real assets. And when I say real assets, if I'm doing a development of, my uncle owns a piece of land, and I want to build 6 houses on it, and I don't have money to pay my uncle. That land my uncle is bringing is quasi-capital. I tell my uncle I'm going to give him 3 houses out of the 6 houses. Then I look for buyers who are going to pay me money to build the 6 houses, and what they're getting is 2 houses for the money they're putting down. And my profit might be 1 house, or my profit might be half a house. And you must have that discipline, which is what I was trying to say, to make sure you deliver the 2 houses, not the 6 houses, but the 2 houses for the guy who has provided you money. Your uncle is going to be there, he's not going anywhere. And the land is not going anywhere because you're building on top of the property. You build the 2 houses, you exit, and then you now seek to make sure you deliver to your uncle. If at the end of the day you don't make any profit, make sure you deliver to your uncle and everybody else, and you have a nice photo to show somebody to start your next project. So that's the advice I would give to new developers or young people.
Spot on, fantastic. So Ron, what are your thoughts on capital, raising capital at such times? Is there capital to be raised? How can
on the very short term, it's a good question. Not sure, but again, it comes back to we're going to have to become innovative in the kind of products we bring to the market, and that's really it. It's there has to be a product that's more resilient, that respects certain standards, and I think that we can find certain standards of quality of development, of environmental. Very short term, maybe a question. So it's good to now finish what we have started, because there's going to be a shortage in the next few years, because I don't think there was a slowdown for many years. We were coming out of the recession, and there's a lot of projects that were put on hold for a long time, and now are going to be put on hold for a longer time. So everything that we already have investments in, and that should be completed in the next year or 2 or 3, we may end up being the only ones. Whoever has these products, the only ones on the market with something to offer. Whereas if we keep on putting on hold, waiting for great times, then we can keep on waiting for, we never know. It could be in 2 years, could be 1 year, could be. So yeah.
I can't let you go without, all three of you, without getting this out of you. So a lot of times, and growing up, I always hear this, that a lot of the very wealthy people, okay, make most of their wealth in recessionary times. Yeah, I've heard it. I don't know. Yinka has not heard it before, but I think Yemi has heard it before, and it seems Ronald has also heard it before.
Yes.
What kind of opportunities do you see in real estate at this time? I'll allow you to take a moment to think about it. Because, and I think that's why a lot of people are excited. I mean, we've hit record numbers, on this call, and people want to get into your minds because these are things that you three seem to have been able to do. All right. When we look at Banana Island, or look at the projects you did at Yinka, Yemi, Idowu, synonymous with doing projects at any time and making a hit of it. So, what opportunities, and I mean, if you're so gracious enough to share with the people that have taken out this over an hour, 30 minutes to listen to us today, what opportunities will you say you see? And I mean, these could be opportunities that are very difficult to tap, and that's where the sweet spot is. I think Yemi mentioned execution when you started. You talked about, you grew up with a lot of people that potentially had the same dreams, but you were able to execute. So that might be the challenge, the ability to execute. But I'm just going on talking, giving you time to think through.
Yes. I jump in there. I think people confuse making money sometimes with protecting wealth. When you're in a recession, your activities should be geared towards protecting your assets. If you're poor and you don't have money, you've got nothing to lose. The guy who really is about in the recession is the guy who has a lot of money or assets to lose. And it's not necessarily the billionaires. We're talking about middle class people who have worked very hard. That percentage of their personal wealth. What was said earlier today, and this is my point I want to make out of this. Yes, I'm a property developer, so I'm going to advise you to invest in property. That's empirical data. We talked about research, and that is, you need to get any potential property developer or investor that's watching this to go and take the data from 1972 till today. And that is to chart the dollar equivalent of value of land in parts of Lagos from 1972 till 2020. And you look at the naira value and you look at the dollar value. And if you're in a situation where today someone is sending you, go and buy dollar and put under your mattress and everything, that is just fool's gold. What you should be doing is you should look into money in real estate, and sensible real estate, not just everything that's advertised in front of you. And sometimes, and this is the other part, you don't buy what you like, good value for money. So if you know you want to live in Ikoyi, but your money doesn't, is not up to what you can buy in Ikoyi, buy what you can afford to buy, and at least you get onto the property ladder. And then from there, you can go to the next step. But if you take that money and you put it in the bank, even what you could buy before, you can no longer buy. And that's the defensive side of this thing. So as we're facing a recession now, if you have a bank account, what you can do, instead of going to buy dollar or something, is to buy property. And here's the point. You said people make money during a recession. Now is the time you can get good deals. Mm-hmm. You can get payment terms. You can go in there. What was $10? You can probably get for $8. You can probably pay $2 and pay gradually. You can do a lot of things, and that's where you make the money, by acting defensively. Buying dollars and putting under your mattress is not an investment move. It's a lazy move. And unless you have large amounts of money, going to buy $2,000 and putting under your mattress is just wasting time. Even I said something to this, might sound funny, but it's a fact. I said something to my driver, and he has a piece of land, and I said to him, buy cement, buy sand, and make blocks, and make paving stones. The rain is going to fall on the paving stones, nothing's going to happen. The rain is going to fall on the block. But that money is not going to be able to buy those paving stones for you in 2 years' time. So keep it there, and that's the store of wealth that you can have. That's my answer for the recession.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
And very well said.
Yes.
Very, very well said. Very well said. I don't know if any of the other panelists wants to add to that.
I would just say, sorry, Ronald, please go ahead.
No, go for it. Go ahead.
Okay. I would just say, as Nigerians, I think we're hot-wired to buy, I say this all the time, we're hot-wired to buy land. Women, when we're young, as our mothers are telling us, buy land. And what we see in the land markets is, even in times of uncertainty, there's activity in land markets. So I would say, to do now, I completely agree with Yemi that you should, you should invest in real estate, even in times of recession. And I think, look at new markets. A lot of people make an investment decision by saying, I wouldn't live in Badagry or Ikorodu, so why would I buy land there? But what you're looking at is the potential for growth. And so if you go out into markets where you see a potential, perhaps a new road is going into that market. Perhaps there's an anchor development, perhaps there's a new refinery, hint, hint. Perhaps there's a new port. So look for land that may not look like anything today, but will certainly have value. There's certainly growth in that land. And go out there and buy as much as you can of that sort of land where you see that there's potential for growth. That's what I would say. Also, you could also buy PPE and sell that. And sell that. But I would say, honestly, go into new markets and buy cheap land that has a growth potential.
Brilliant. Ronald.
So the cheap land is fantastic, because at the end, again, Lagos, Nigeria is going to keep on growing over the next 7 decades. So at some point, even if it's waiting in long term, it's still going to be there. Land is land. The concrete paving blocks are going to remain, and so that's one element. And yes, distressed assets, quality distressed assets, very important, because you can get very low quality distressed assets. It's going to be the biggest nightmare. But in the 2008 crisis, if we look at major moves in Europe and in the US as example, some of the biggest funds, some of the biggest income made was buying off a lot of distressed assets over long term, and then leasing them out at a discount and making a very decent return for many, many, many years. Stock market, it's every time there's a crisis in Nigeria, we see money flowing out. Anytime we see a minor hiccup or even a big hiccup now, on the global stage, we see money flowing out, and that basically sinks the stock market. But then at some point, that money will come back. So it's also being able to position ourselves at the right time. And I'm not that great on the stuff, but it's just being an observant. It's seeing in Nigeria, it's very. Anytime there's an international hiccup, an oil hiccup, money flows out, and then at some point it just flows back in. So that's also opportunities of owning probably the best stocks of the best companies in the country, and being well positioned for that growth. And that's when we say that it's being able to have some ammunition in these difficult times. It does require that.
I may not be able to let you go until I ask this final question. And this one is very close to my heart. I literally wrote a book on the subject, and I will start with Yinka. I will move to Ron, and then I will let Yemi close. On the issue of affordable housing, who is responsible? How do we solve this quagmire? Yinka.
Okay. I think affordable housing is only one way of addressing the housing deficit. I think we need to turn it on its head a bit and start to look at rental property. Most of our population, or a lot of our population, lives on less than $2 a day or lives on the red line. Yet we continue to address housing for the tip of the pyramid until we start to look at that middle and bottom pyramid strategy, until we find a strategy for that market. It's even going to blight our properties. It's going to affect our development. So I think looking at some sort of model where we're able to have rental property for a lot of the population, like in Austria and Germany. I think in Austria, it's 60% of Austrians live in rented property. I think it's a reality we just need to understand and start to develop for that market. So I think it's, even when we're talking about government interventions and private sector and public sector interventions, we need to look at that market rather than thinking, oh, how do I build a 5 million naira home or a 2 million naira home to address this market? It's not realistic. So let's start to look. I mean, I think a lot of us would like to go into rental markets, but because of the way we finance our projects and the cost of construction and the lack of long-term funding, it's difficult to do. But if we have government or some social housing or housing, I don't know, a social landlord that can offtake from what we develop or something, or have interventions in that way, I think it's something we should all start to address and all start to think about.
Fantastic. Rental housing. Ron.
Wonderful point. It's yes, suddenly it's I'm building an apartment at this price. Oh, it's too expensive because there's no mortgage available. Yeah, but no, where in the world do people buy homes cash outright? Yes, a lot of people all over the world, it's when there's a cheap mortgage, people use that, and that makes that whatever that figure is affordable. But that's assuming we want to purchase. But yes, rental is the way to go. It's like, is it affordable enough to rent? That's the big question. So I tested for many years how to build very, very low cost single-story homes. It is extremely challenging to be able to get to that right price point, and any mistake wipes out completely the investment, and we can be in loss. And yes, we can get land available by government, so we do let's say the 5 million naira home. You manage to get it to, let's say, the cost of 4 million, 4.5 million by really stretching, and suddenly you realize, oh, but we have to do all the infrastructure as well of the estate, and that's it, completely wiped out. Whereas a rental model with a decent yield can now attract all kinds of institutional investors, and probably institutional investors who are looking specifically for this kind of funding. And I'm sure we can find a lot more of that, or we can develop a market for that if we provided a product. A big fan of your response, Yinka.
Brilliant. Yemi?
I think they've answered it. There's a realization that is slowly, the message is getting across very slowly. They've tried all different points, LSDPC, Federal Housing Authority, and all the Federal Mortgage Bank and all things. So the idea of building, selling without a properly structured mortgage industry, you'll only attract people, the rich people who could have built anyway or could have bought their own property. They come in and intervene, and even if you sell to the poor people, they just resell it and take them on the margin and walk away. So people have realized that aspect, the dysfunctional aspect of that part of the industry. The second part is that you actually have a situation where infrastructure-wise, we're dysfunctional, and that's what every developer has to deal with. So even if you did build a nice estate within an area, you find that perhaps the town planning has not provided enough electricity, or the cables coming there, you're gonna have to run higher capacity cables, or you're gonna have to do your own water treatment plant, or even your own sewage treatment plant, and refuse collection and everything. All this add up to the cost of the development. But here's the actual point. Instead of trying to tackle it from the tertiary side, we need to go to the primary side. And that is that we have to change our mindset from building affordable housing to manufacturing affordable housing. Today, if you want to produce enough blocks for 17 million dwelling units, all the sand in Lagos State lagoon will be gone, and will sink. All the trees in Ondo State will be gone if you want to chop wood to make the roofing. You want to make and all that stuff. You can't build naturally with the current system and build 17 million dwelling units. You've got to manufacture. You've got to put it into a systemic product and manufacture the unit. Manufacture plastic boards. Is manufacture everything and then assemble it together. Because the current method of arranging the blocks, we don't have the manpower, so you're going to need all the people from Cotonou and Togo to come and mortar it for you and plaster all the things. It's consumed to paint it, to do everything. So if you are able to go to manufacturing of how to deliver very fast, even if you do that, really solve the problem, because it's not cheaper. Because this is one of the mistakes people make when they come and see prefab and all these things. They think it's cheaper. No, it's not. So you need to now move to that rental model where you must have some kind of offtake and then they rent out. So it's the same thing. I either provide lots of money to an inefficient system for people to build that they can sell and then rent out, or I provide the money for people who can, manufacture, and immediately it's ready, I take it, absorb it on my balance sheet, and I rent it out to people, maybe police, nurses, doctors, essential services, people who perhaps might not be able to intervene in the market. Now, why am I saying those people? Those are the people who already pay the pensions. They already have the money in the pension fund here to actually take this property onto the balance sheet and then rent out to them. And the money they provide, what's the kind of income you get if you are invested in the stock market. So, incidentally, doing something now in Ajegunle, right? So can I plug? So, I'm doing over 1,000 flats in Ajegunle right now. And when we started this project, a lot of people thought I was crazy. And, we were surprised at the kind of demand that existed for 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom flats. But everybody that was coming wanted it, but they can't afford it. They all want to rent. Now, trying to find the investor or the buyer who's going to buy it and rent to them is where the challenge is. So the minute you are able to create the structure that you can bring in the capital into a framework property and will provide stable rental properties to this type of market, we crack it. Because the people in Austria that Yinka is talking about, you find a property in a very highbrow area that's social housing. And people who are rich are not allowed to come in to, gazump or overprice to price out the people who those houses are built for. So social housing in Nigeria has to be seen as some kind of social service that's been given, and I don't want to use the word subsidized, but it's they intervene by providing infrastructure, by providing the funding, by providing the offtake for the developers who will develop and create housing stock. When you offtake from me, I get my money back and I'll go and build another one. Then you offtake and I build another one. And so over time, we build up a big enough portfolio that will be able to at least intervene to take care of the people who normally would not be able to get accommodation in the private sector.
Tayo, and thank you to the panelists. It's been a great evening. Very quickly, I just wanted to piggyback on what Ronnie said regarding mortgages. He mentioned that it is impossible to fill the gap without a functional mortgage system. What is the reason why we can't have a functional mortgage system to fill this gap in Nigeria?
All right. Thank you, Tokwe.
I think Yemi should answer
that. Definitely good.
Okay. The price of money in Nigeria, the money is the benchmark treasury rediscount rate in Nigeria. So for as long as the treasury rediscount rate is high, you will not be able to have cheap funds in the market. So basically the money goes to where the best returns are. So I'm not going to invest in something with a lower yield than what I would get when I'm having riskless yield at a higher rate. You understand what I mean? So what you have to do is the only solution is to compartmentalize the money, and you do some price discrimination, and you prevent a situation where the money can go from one side to the other. Which is what I was trying to explain when I was trying to explain that instead of money going into the market, the money must go into bonds. So what would happen? And I'm going to tell you what, because I was on the BDAN, I was secretary for BDAN for 5 years, many years ago. And what we had proposed to them, but unfortunately, this guy left, Sanusi left as CBN governor, was that we told them that, look, when you release this money, people will not take that money and invest where you want them to do. Because once the money is in their hands, they're in control and they behave like entrepreneurs. They will try and get the best yield. Releasing the money, you persuade the guy to go and perform. Because one of the problems also by releasing money is people sometimes don't perform. So you persuade the guy to perform, and then once he performs, you offtake from him. But instead of giving him cash, because you don't have that money, you can give him bonds, which he can go and discount in the market, get his money, walk away. And the people who buy the bonds will wait for the year time. So you now create a market which people can now leverage funds and slowly attract capital to build up the balance sheet that will fund mortgages. Because what is mortgages at the end of the day? You're having they're asset backed. So if I have a situation where I am lending money to somebody against an asset, I must be able to exit and go and play that trick again. So my of that money should be such that I should be able to match it against the pension yield, not my money market yield. So my money market yield will be only for that mediation period, which you can, sorry, I'm getting a bit too technical. Do you understand what I mean?
Yes, I do, but I hope, Tokwe and the remainder of the attendees can follow you. But please keep going on. Yeah.
The effect is that if I take normal depositors' money today and I price it in the market, it's too expensive for mortgagee, right? But if I'm able to match him with the pension fund that's having a lower expectation of his yield, then I can deliver that money to the mortgagee at a lower price. but I must be able to put some sweetener in there such that the pension fund will be very happy to put that money down. That pension fund doesn't want to put money and wait for 18 months for that property to be ready. So somebody in the middle must be able to fund that creation of asset such that when that property is ready and is generating income, that is when pension money is coming in. That way, you will be able to get the mortgage system to work. And once you now make it a liquid instrument, I don't have to be stuck for 25 years waiting for the guy to pay me back. I don't have to be stuck for 5 years waiting for him to pay me back. I can go in and come out and go in and come out just like stock exchange.
And keep creating new mortgages. Keep creating new mortgages.
But even the guy who is funding the mortgage is not stuck for 10 years or 15 years. He invests for a short period of time and he exits and another person takes over and such like that. And that's the only way you're going to get liquidity and capital into the mortgage markets in Nigeria. And you bring down the cost of providing mortgage to match the yield that the investor is expecting.